What we should appreciate now is that when you have different users of financial reports and they use it for different purposes, then that's going to create conflict in terms of what people want to be shown in financial reports and how they want the information to be determined. And the mechanism that we have for resolving that conflict is regulation. And it's important that we reflect upon why we need regulation, because that provides insights into, well, the regulation may at times seem arbitrary, but that's not a fatal flaw. What we need to understand is that general purpose financial reports are, at the end of the day, a communication device. And irrespective of the use of the accounting information and irrespective of the requirements of individual users, unless they understand how the accounting information is being calculated, then they aren't able to use it properly, appropriately. And that means that we need rules. And just as in English we have rules of spelling and grammar, in accounting we're also going to need rules if we're going to communicate effectively. And what you can see here is an example of a spelling problem that one of my students had once, and I'll let you try and guess what word they were trying to communicate to me. I think you could agree that would be a communication failed. What we also need to appreciate is that we need the rules applied, and we need them applied consistently across companies and across time. So regulation is going to provide us with rules in terms of how the numbers are presented in financial reports, how they're calculated. And we should appreciate this extends to the provision of general purpose financial reports, the contents of general purpose financial reports, and the basis on which the items recognised in general purpose financial reports are calculated. Now this has some pretty significant practical implications, and you might think about these having regard to an actual annual report, and just for a change I'm picking on Qantas. So what we're going to expect in the legislation, the regulation that addresses financial reporting, is that there are going to be the requirements to provide general purpose financial reports, and we are going to have regulations which restrict accounting policy choice. It's going to be on issues such as when do you recognise revenue. And there are also going to be rules in terms of making sure that we have enough disclosure so that the information is able to be interpreted. Where does that regulation come from in Australia? Well, it's probably fair to say that the number one source of regulation for financial reporting in Australia is probably the Corporations Act, Part 2M.3. And this stipulates all aspects of not only keeping books and records, but also preparing financial reports, complying with accounting standards, ensuring that the reports present a true and fair view, and complying with applicable accounting standards. The accounting standards that we have are those which are in the first instance issued by the International Accounting Standards Board, and I would encourage you to have a look at the IASB's website, well, its standard setting website, which is ifrs.org. And as you're going through the website, I'd ask you to think about, why do we have global accounting standards? If we have global companies, we need global accounting firms, and we need a global language, global accounting standards. I think it's fairly obvious as to why these days we all use, well, almost all of us use international accounting standards. The primary exception is the United States, and they follow standards issued by the Federal Financial Accounting Standards Board. And yes, there are differences, but they're probably less than they used to be. In Australia, the standards are issued by the Australian Accounting Standards Board, and for the purpose of our course here, you'd have to say that they simply reissue the standards issued by the IASB. This isn't quite true. They don't just reissue them. In Australia, we have accounting standards which are intended to be sector neutral. What that means is they apply not only to the for-profit private sector, but they apply to the non-for-profit sector, and they apply to the government sector. Quite obviously that requires modification, and you can see these modifications inside the Australian accounting standards, where you'll see paragraphs labelled AUS paragraphs. So I'd encourage you to just have a quick look at one or two of the accounting standards and just see that they, whilst they're largely reissued and they are totally consistent with IASBs, they are subject to minor modifications to make them sector neutral. So that's why we have regulation, and that's who issues the regulation. And now that we understand that, I think we're in a much better position